Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. I know I said 20 minutes, but my dogs took longer. It took a little bit longer. Hope everyone is doing okay. It's 6:53 on a Tuesday. Again, I like giving this point in time. Yeah, hope everyone has an awesome day. So I've been thinking about doing this video for a while. Let me do a sound check. I thought it was an interesting video the first time I came across it. Jason Unruhe had a debate with Sargon of Akkad. No, that's not his real name. At least I don't think it's his real name. British cat. I don't know much about him, if I'm being honest. I don't even know much about Jason Unruhe or Unruhe. I have to be honest. Within the first few minutes of this debate, I stopped the debate and I went to check through Jason Unruhe's catalog. I was fascinated by the guy. Like, he calls himself like a Maoist. He's been doing this for God knows how long. He has like 30,000 subscribers, and they function in their, you know, I've said before, perspectives are relative. So it's not like this perspective is definitive. Everyone thinks their perspective is definitive. It is not. I hate to disabuse you of that. There are multiple perspectives. The mainstream media is a narrative. It's a perspective of the world. It's not the world. It's a perspective of the world. Runs the gambit. All of these little perspectives floating in a void, punching at one another when their relative, you know, distance are close enough where they see each other and can come to arms. I looked through his catalog and he's like a battling Maoist. Like it was like one debate after the next. He's battling all of these people. Some of them he trashes them outright, just destroys them. In other cases, it's like, oh God, I don't know what the fuck is taking place in this conversation where both people are just kind of quibbling over definitions. This one was interesting. Now, personally, I don't think Unruhe won this. I know, and not because he didn't have the details, not because, you know, it's not like from a factual standpoint, or how can I say this? Like from the standpoint of the details of the information and the facts are on my side. Oftentimes, facts and data don't win debates. That's why I don't like debates. I like to watch them. But facts and data don't win debates. You could be absolutely factually right and still come out losing that debate. And that's with anything. That's with people watching the debate. That's with you interacting with the debate. Sometimes stylistic concerns take over. And this one was slightly weird. The reason why I say that is not because Jason didn't necessarily have the facts on his side. There's stuff that he said that was right, that completely eviscerates something that Sargon was saying. But Sargon kind of doubles down. He just kind of plows through as if what he said wasn't the doom bringer of what Sargon was saying. Because look, if we're having an ideological conversation, I can't fight you on ideological grounds. You think capitalism is fucking awesome, all right? You're willing to deal with the consequences of capitalism, fair enough. You think socialism is awesome, fair enough. You're willing to deal with the consequences. And I don't say consequences as this rigid thing. I say consequences as you run 100 tests, and out of those 100 tests, 60 come out this way, 30 come out, or 40 come out a different way. What's more likely to be the repercussions of the thing that you're talking about? And if you're willing to deal with the consequences of those choices in the way you've laid it out, fair enough. Fair enough. I can't argue on that point. Now, I can argue on the point of, if what you're saying is that you're okay with economic or environmental collapse, and we only have one planet, then what you're saying is wrong. You're talking about oblivion. You're flat out wrong. If you're telling me that people are making money and they have iPhones, and I'm telling you, yeah, but the world is falling apart, then you lose. Because the world is falling apart. That takes precedence over the idea that people can have iPhones. I mean, come on, let's be honest. This doesn't make sense. Hey, I got this new ink pen. Yeah, I know, but the world is falling apart. I know, but I got a new ink pen and I got a new iPhone. Look at all the features of this iPhone. I understand, but do you understand the repercussions of what you're talking about? But I have a new iPhone, so fuck all the repercussions. Well, yeah, unfortunately, if I'm standing this from God's arbiter, and I'm looking at this person as an iPhone, whereas this group is in poverty, or this group went through some kind of environmental collapse because of it, or that the scientists are telling us that the world is falling apart based on some kind of environmental collapse, based on the actions and activities that are completely associated with you getting that iPhone, then I don't care that you got that iPhone. Is it possible you could have got that iPhone in a way that didn't necessarily involve raping over the planet? It might not have been an iPhone, but it might have been technology in a similar fashion. I just find the debate interesting, so I'm going to play parts of the debate. I'm just going to let a section of it run. It's a 2-hour debate, so I'm not going to play the whole thing because the whole thing would be insane. But there is an exchange, a few exchanges that they get into that I want to talk about because I think the exchanges are interesting. I don't think Jason did his strongest argument here, which is all I want to talk about. And again, I'm not ideologically fixed on any of these points. You know my position. Make sure people have access to the things that they need. Make sure the environment is sustainable. That's my main focus. I don't care what you call that system. I don't care how that system works in the sense of the names. Like, I don't care about the names. I don't care about the labels. I care about what it does. That's all. I care about what it does. Are these check marks checked? If that answer is yes, at the very least, gold star. I accept that there will always be consequences for any arrangement that we take. The question is, what are those consequences? What are the consequences that we're willing to accept as opposed to the consequences that we should not be willing to accept? Especially now. I'm not talking about something 50, 60 years ago. I'm talking about now, based on our current technological advancement. What are the consequences? What is the arrangement that we should be arranged in? What are we willing to accept in the arrangements that we come about? We have access to technology that makes sure everyone have the things that they need. If we are not making sure everyone have the things that they need, then something is wrong. Now, I make the argument that system is flawed if that's the case. If Bill Gates or if Jeff Bezos is walking around with $100 billion and you have somebody else without a home, that's a problem. That's a problem in the way that you've organized yourself. Now, I'm going to let the capitalists versus the communists do their thing. Let them slug it out. And let's take a listen. I will interject in some of this, of course, because otherwise, what's the point? Sargon of Akkad versus Jason Unruhe. Capitalists versus Maoists. Let's get ready to rumble.
Sort of underlying structural problems with Marxism.
I don't believe that. I mean, there can be. Nothing is perfect, of course.
I mean, in theory, not necessarily. Because I mean, like putting things into practice like that. You can see the inherent dangers of centralizing a system that relies on information that is going to end up, as we see, being false or faulty.
Yeah, but this happened in the Chinese case, but not the Soviet case. I think that there's a difference between the two. China failed to industrialize. The Soviet Union did industrialize. Which is why I tend not to focus too much on what a certain leader said or an aspect of his personality. I tend to focus on the theory. What was right? What was wrong? What didn't work? What did work?
Same here, actually. Although I've read a lot more about the Soviet Union than I have Maoist China. But I'm trying not to come at this from a liberal perspective, which is why I'm not bang on about death tolls already. So I'm trying to engage with this through the Marxist perspective. So, I mean, one of my main.
I love the British accent. I love the British accent. It doesn't matter what you're saying. It makes it sound rational. I'm trying to deal with this not from a liberal perspective, but from a, the Marxist perspective. I'm not going to mention death tolls. You just mentioned it. You just mentioned it. You just mentioned death tolls. Hey, I have a question, Sargon. I have a question. When you're talking about capitalism, do you bring up slavery? Why don't no one ever brings up slavery? No one ever brings up slavery. Let's talk about death tolls. Death tolls took place hundreds of, 50, 60 years ago. Agreed. That's a part that you have to accommodate if you're talking about it. Shouldn't capitalists also own death tolls in slavery? How many people were put into slavery? What were some of the consequences of slavery? What were the nasty, disgusting things that Britain and America was doing with regard to slavery? And why were they doing it? You think they were doing it because they were horrible people? Or do you think they were doing it because they were getting free labor? If they were getting free labor, why? Why was that necessary? Why was that useful? It was useful because it allowed them to expand this kind of capitalistic thing. We got free labor so we can sell these goods and we have free labor. That's capitalism also. There was somewhat of an impetus to do that. Do you think they just did that willy-nilly? Oh, we're just bad people, so we're going to put people in bondage in order to do what? In order to do what? There's a capitalistic imperative in getting labor for cheap. Hey, what's better than cheap labor? Free labor. Why do you think that the California prison system is working people for 8 cents to 30 cents a day? Why do you think they're keeping those people in prison, even though courts have told them to let those people out? Labor. They want cheap labor. What's better than cheap labor? Free labor. Every time someone brings up death tolls, often think of slavery. They always say, hey, the communistic system did X, Y, Z, or the socialistic system did X, Y, Z. And I said, yes, you're right. The capitalistic system also had slaves. They also had slaves. Cost-benefit analysis. Cost-benefit ratio. Hey, it is beneficial to me to get free labor. It is beneficial to me to attack labor, to push down their wages. Do you know real wages hasn't increased since the 80s? Do you know that? Now, the tweak from slavery to capitalism, or I consider slavery capitalism, but that tweak in the system of, okay, we're not going to have slaves anymore. Well, you still have people paid shit and piss for wages. That impetus is always there. The moment that you get the imperative, they'll allow the plutocrats to try to push down on this idea of wages and workers and everything else. They're going to do it. They have an impetus to do it. That's their incentive to do it. I can maximize my profit by doing this. This is the capitalistic imperative at work here. I'm trying to make this point here that death tolls are horrible, but so is slavery. Slavery is an atrocity. I can go into this idea of expansion. I can even make the argument that the expansion itself, meaning Britain going into these territories and colonizing places. What did you do to India, Britain? What did you do to India? Why did you do it to India? Was it a reason to expand your markets? Because you couldn't necessarily allow the capitalistic system purely in Britain. You needed to expand into other markets. I'm making the point to you that the horrors that took place under the Stalinist regime, to some degree, also took place under capitalism, just in a different form and a different guise. I'm not going to mention death tolls. That's a horrible accent. Let's keep going. People often do this, and they often give a blind eye to one as opposed to the other. Death tolls are horrible. They were miserable death tolls under Stalin. If you run the Soviet experiment multiple times, however, are you going to get the death tolls in each and every case? Probably not. How many times would you get it? I have no idea. Do I like this idea of centralized control over each and everything? No, I don't. I don't like the communistic system from the standpoint of this central control of everything. But by the same token, we have the top 1% controlling the capitalistic system. Now, there may be entries into the political space and everything else, fair enough to some degree. We call it democratic. I think it's less and less democratic. But let's not pretend that capitalism didn't have its horrors. It may not have been death things. And honestly, I would make a case to you that the militaristic expansion under capitalism has its own death tolls. Like, don't misunderstand me. States have their reason for doing things. But why are we in Iraq? You can say that there's this ideologically bend to do that, but let's be honest. We want access to those oil markets. Why are we in Syria? Do you know that right now that the United States, in that part of the region that it's taken over, it will annex those oil territories. It will try to get access to those oil markets. Part of the reason that they want to side out that seat, yes, it's part of the reason it's kind of geopolitical influence. But let's not be coy. Part of this has also to do with, hey, they have oil in that part of the world. They have oil in that part of the world. I'm making a point to you that military conquest, military expansionism at some point is pushed on by capitalistic pursuits. We spend $1 trillion on the military. You understand that? That money is going into militaristic pursuits. Do you believe that us spending $1 trillion on the military, that they have having people flush with this cash, giving politicians money, saying you need to spend money on the military, that this in no way influences the United States' decision to use military power around the world in a way that has bases and everything else around the world? Now, that's not militaristic concern from a sense of expansionism, from a market standpoint. That's just purely internal market dynamics. We sell weapons across the world. What do you think those weapons are used for? Protecting cats. They're not. They're not. One other point. Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a terroristic regime that spreads terrorism all throughout that region of the world. We have an oil for security pact with Saudi Arabia. This is not like the capitalistic thing. People are talking about death tolls and everything else. They often miss, and they often completely ignore this idea of how the market affects foreign policy. Yes, the communistic system had horrors. The capitalistic system also has horrors. If you're going to name one, name the other. I understand that they take place in different forms, but they still take place. Let's keep going.
One of my main concerns about Marx is that I just think his theory.
And by the way, what I mean by Saudi Arabia, we sell them weapons. Why are we selling them weapons? Well, it's advantageous to sell us weapons. We make them, they buy them. There's a capitalistic instinct associated with that. I'm just making this point of, under normal circumstances, if it wasn't this thing built on cash, would we be so willing to sell this regime weapons? I don't think so.
Is wrong. I don't think it's correct, and I think we can demonstrate how it hasn't borne the predictions that he made. I mean, what do you think of that? Do you?
Oh, Marx was definitely wrong on some predictions. I don't think that his theory is wrong, but they didn't manifest themselves exactly the way he thought they was going to.
It looks like they did the exact opposite.
In some regards, yes. I would say that I would say that.
Sorry, no. Oh well, I was going to say let's be specific then. I can give three particular things. So, the three predictions that I would like to talk about So the proletariat would increase as a percentage of the population and become poorer. The opposite has happened, at least in my country. Britain's a very class-conscious country, so unlike America, we actually have hard data on our social classes. And there are 7 of them now, apparently, according to a study done, or at least reported about in the BBC. Let me just give you the year. It's pretty recent, about 2013 it was. And it was called the Great British Class Survey. And we ended up with 7 classes. We've got, obviously, the elite, the established middle class, the technical middle class, the new affluent workers, the traditional working class, the emergent service sector, and the precariat, which are the obviously very lowest class in society. And so it's interesting because, you can use any country as a model for this as well. I actually have all of the data courtesy of Steven Pinker, who provides it all in his Enlightenment Now book, to explain just how capitalism is actually making the entire world bourgeois, slowly but surely, which must drive Marxists crazy.
To which I can perfectly understand. Inequality did not manifest itself the way he predicted. Marx's original prediction was that there would be a growing gap between the rich and the poor in each country as they progressed. Now, as we saw, some countries did not progress.
Well, it's not just the gap. It's the poor would become poorer.
The immiseration of the working class. Now, where he was wrong was that inequality didn't go the way that he thought it would. He thought it would grow in every country at relatively the same rate as it would develop. And thus, it would only be a matter of the workers uniting across the world in order to create revolution. That did not happen.
Yeah, I don't think it could happen.
Again, hindsight.
True, but
I would say that no, there's not going to be an equal development across the world.
It's not just that. I mean, if we want to talk about so most people who encounter communists on the internet are familiar with the phrase, but that wasn't real communism.
Yes, and I particularly despise that one. But I just want to finish something that I was saying before.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, the gap did grow, but the gap grew between the first world and the third world. There was a study, an OECD study. I don't have the link on me right now, but I'll find it. Where the wealth inequality between the advanced countries and the poor countries was 1 to 12 in like the 1850s. Today it stands at 1 to 72. So inequality did grow, but it did not grow the way Marx had expected it to. In that regard, he was wrong. So if we continue to push this idea that it is just simply a matter of the workers uniting across the whole world, unite together as one, that's based on something that did not happen. And that's one of the problems that Marxism is facing today, they haven't yet acknowledged that that didn't happen.
Yeah, and it's not just that either, because like I said, the immiseration of the working class or the poorest, they're not getting poorer, they're getting richer.
In the first world, yes, they are. They are
Not just
richer.
in the first world; they're getting richer across the entire world.
Actually,
no, that's absolutely true.
I have right here, I believe it's the Harvard Business Review, that globalization did not do that.
I'm afraid that they're wrong then. The data shows
you're telling
that
them
there are just less people in poverty now than there were than ever before.
Well, it depends on how you define.
Okay, they're getting in weeds, and they're slightly talking past each other. Sargon is making the point, look, people are getting richer. I don't know if that's true, but he's saying people are getting richer. And making the point that Marx was wrong in saying that the immiseration of the working class. In this case, in the other case, Jason Unruhe is saying, well, yeah, it didn't necessarily work out exactly the way Marx said, but income inequality has spiked. Now, what Sargon is somewhat attacking him on is not whether or not income inequality is spiked. He's attacking him on this idea of the working class, the poor getting poorer. Look, I don't know if that's true, but I don't know if that's a defense. Like, what I mean is, for example, look, if, right here, Obama admits 95% of the income gains went to the top 1%. Well, that's interesting. You have 100 slices of pizza, one guy comes in and takes 95. Now, you tell me that, hey, poverty, the poor aren't as poor as they were. Yeah, but you're looking at shit like this. Obama admits 95% of the wealth income gains went to the top 1%. Why is 95% of the wealth going to the top 1%? Why do you have a system that allows 95% of the wealth to go to the top 1%? I understand, even if what you're saying is true, that this guy doesn't have $1, he has $1.25. That's great. He has $1.25. Why are 95% of the gains in the system that you're out here fighting for going to the top 1%? Beyond that, I mean, look at this. And right here. Even this. This is damning. Billionaires made so much money last year they could end extreme poverty 7 times over. Just the billionaires by themselves. Just by the money they made last year. Is this the system the Sargon wants to defend? Even if you make the case that people have getting $1 or $2 more than what they used to get, I don't necessarily know if that's true, but even if I grant them that, your system is allowing massive amounts of inequality. And in this case, it has enough to make sure that people have the things that they need 7 times over, apparently. Let's let them keep going. Let's let them fight this out. I understand Akkad is a Maoist. And I understand he's trying to hold on to a certain particular point of view. Fair enough. They're slightly talking about different things, though. Let's let him keep going.
Poverty, yes. If you turn in that way, yes. But it's the inequality.
Inequality isn't actually a problem. Inequality doesn't hurt someone. If you've got £500,000 and I've got £10 billion, you still have £500,000. No, despite the fact that my income, absolutely
no, because the value of a money, it kind of relies on the principle.
Well, yeah, I'm assuming we're not in Venezuela.
No, it relies on the principle that if everybody has a lot of money, then everybody's rich. Well, no, if everybody has like £500, then that £500 isn't worth that much anymore.
Yeah. Well, okay. So the purchasing power of money. Okay, so I'm not saying that everyone has to be a millionaire or something like that, but the purchasing power of their money allows them to get an extremely high quality of life, the highest quality of life that the poor have ever had, anywhere in the world, anywhere in all of history, and that's this is in the third world now. I mean, like all across Africa, mobile phone towers are going up because they are just they are actually able to afford these things. It's a huge booming market for mobile phones.
I don't think it's the way that you're representing it. It's not like everybody's having them. There is a growing middle class. Yes.
Yeah, I didn't say everybody. I said that people are getting wealthier, and even the poorest people are getting wealthier. I mean, in the last, let me find the numbers because it's really staggering. So, talking about extreme poverty, here we go. So this is people who lived on less than $1 a day. In 1820, it was 90% of the world. In the year 2000, it was 30% of the world.
Yes, but what was the purchasing power?
I haven't got that on this graph, I'm afraid.
That's pretty important.
Well, sure, but I mean, the purchasing power of $1 is pretty good.
It is within a certain context. For example, one of the poorest countries is Ghana.
Jason, the problem that I have here with this conversation is the meaning of words. That sounds weird, but it's true. Making the argument of wealthier. What does that mean? Now, Jason is fighting on this thing of, I mean, I guess I'm saying is, even if what you're saying is true, what does it mean in the context of, but what is the actual pie? Like wealthier, yeah, wealthier within the context of people making massive amounts of cash. Like you're talking about income inequality on record levels. People having as much money as pharaohs. I remember this point where the guy on it was Bill Moore was making this point that the amount of money that people have made over the 30 years, or the last 30 years, is ungodly sums of money. I mean, you're talking about something that could end poverty completely. It could end it completely. Wealthier. Okay, wealthier. Wealthier could be at 20 cents more. Wealthier could be $1 more. It's like fighting on this point of wealthier. Okay, even if what you're saying is true, why do we have poverty at all? I mean, under the current model, I understand this tweaks into the system. So if somebody is fighting for Rome and they're talking about America, well, there are differences in the system between Rome and America. Yeah, you would trend towards America. If you were having a conversation about, this is in part the reason why people vote Democrat over Republican. They're terrified of Republicans. It's not that they love Democrats. They think Republicans are a little bit are worse. But Democrats aren't great. Like, it's like, I guess my feeling is like fighting for this thing. It's one thing if Sargon attacked us from the perspective of somebody who didn't necessarily have a bit in one particular direction. But he's attacking us from the perspective of the capitalists. I don't know if he's a capitalist, but he's attacking us from the perspective of the capitalists. And I don't necessarily think the capitalist has anything to root his horn about for saying, yes, people who have $2 in their pockets now have $1 more, whereas Bill Gates is walking around with nearly $100 billion. We're making them wealthier. We gave them an extra $1. Let's let him finish. The wealthier thing is nebulous to me. I don't know what that means. Saying the purchasing power of $1 is pretty great. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. You're sitting wherever you're sitting. Yeah, I bet it's pretty fucking great for you. What about the guy who only has $2? I've traveled into multiple countries. And in many of those countries, one of the things that I haven't found that $1 is some magical thing. $1 purchases, it depends on where you are. Jason Unruhe is not wrong with this. It really does depend on where you are. When I'm in Nepal and I have $1 and I want to buy a bread or a sandwich or whatever else, I'm paying roughly the same amount I would pay in the States. They call it something different. So they call it Nepalese rupees. But for all intents and purposes, what you're buying and the amount that like it's hard to make that transition between $1 versus their own currency. But ultimately, you're not getting a massive amount for the $1. That's all I'm saying. I don't know the magical qualities that Akkad give to the $1, but they don't exist. Saying a purchasing power of $1 is pretty good is not necessarily explaining to me what that means from the standpoint of this person is wealthier. Because that's what I'm trying to get at. I'm saying this in a weird and not necessarily great way. But saying that the purchasing power of $1 is pretty great, I don't know if that's necessarily an argument. Because it's not specific. It doesn't necessarily nail down to what does it mean to have $1 in a particular country. What does it mean to live off $2? When I was in Egypt, the guy told me I spent money on something like a painting or something, and he says, "Oh my God, can't believe you spent money on that for that much." And he's like, "Do you understand that the amount of money that you spend on that, people spend that much for rent, or that they get that much for the entirety of their month?" Now, the amount I spent on that wasn't necessarily a huge amount, but it gets across the level of poverty that these places are facing, and that the idea of the dollar is not this powerful instrument that Sargon of Akkad seems to be making. If you want to make the case that people have gotten wealthier, okay, but put wealthier in context of what does that mean in the context of the great amount of wealth that was created. That's a failure of the system. That's not a win. I'm sorry, that's not a win. Let's let him finish. I don't think that's a win. When I hear people make that case, and he's saying, look at what capitalism is doing, and it's doing this and doing that, that's not indicative of capitalism continuing to go the way it is. Can we do something better, and can we make modifications? Yes, I'm more extreme on this. But even if I moderate myself, and I pull myself back, can we make modifications to the way the system is, at the very least? Get rid of poverty if it doesn't need to exist. If you want to call that something else other than capitalism, fair enough. If you want to call it capitalism plus, fair enough. But arguing that a few people are wealthier is not indicative of, it's not a win. I say it that way. Let's let them keep going. And I understand. They're having an argument between capitalism and communism, so it's a little different. My argument is slightly different. My argument is, why are we staying with this? Even if you're right, why are you okay with the fallout of what's taking place under the model to which you yourself are fighting for? Let's let them keep going.
And they make $2 a day. And then they say, well, it's cheaper to buy things in the third world than it is the first world. Well, that's not true if you live in the third world and you receive a third world wage. Sure, it's $2 a day, but a loaf of bread costs $2.
Not in Ghana, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
Sure. I would be very surprised. I mean, a loaf of bread doesn't cost $2 in my country. Why would it cost $2 in Ghana?
Because it's more expensive to produce. No, I mean, that one's literally true. Like,
true.
You can have the...
Okay. This one is... This got weird to me. I'm like, they're fighting over the price of a loaf of bread in Ghana. Neither one of you would ever be able to get to the end of that answer. There's no way for you to know. There's no way for you to know either case. Move on. Move on. Like, it's... They were like, yes, it is. $2 in Ghana. No, it's not. Yes, it is. I would be completely surprised. It is. Neither one of you would ever know that. Say, I accept that one of us is going to be wrong on this, and let's move on. So, I'll let them fight it out because I have it queued up. But let's not fight this war. I would say this, though. It's Sargon is somewhat wrong on this idea that the dollar has these mystical powers, that it's this great denominator. Like, you can use a dollar and it gets you way... It doesn't work that way. I've been there. I've been to third world countries. It doesn't work that way. A dollar is not all powerful. I went under that same guise thinking my dollar is going to get me all sorts of places. Now, don't get me wrong. Things are cheaper. So yeah, the dollar does go, it depends on what you get. Yeah, in some things. So he's not completely wrong. I don't necessarily want to gut this completely. For instance, if I go to Nepal, yeah, I can stay at somewhere for like $2 or something to that effect. But you're getting, I mean, accommodations are... I'm not going to gut this completely. Sargon is not completely wrong, but it's not as expansive as Sargon is saying. If I went to buy a sandwich, well, my dollar doesn't go as far. If I went for some kind of service, my dollar goes a little bit further. It just depends on what you're talking about. So, both of them are right to some degree. Both of them are wrong to some degree. Let's move on.
There's a purchasing power calculator that you can get online. That is true.
No, I don't think it's true. I mean, like, it's just the data shows that people are... I mean, there is no downside to capitalism, really. That apart from inequality grows, that's the only downside. And it's genuinely making the world richer, healthier, more long-lived, more access to goods, more access to food.
And this is why I wanted to cover this one, right there. That statement. That's laughably ridiculous. Like, that's laughably ridiculous. Even if you're a capitalistic hero, you would never say that. You have to acknowledge the negative consequences of capitalism. Like I said, even slavery. Like this idea of getting free and cheap labor in order to purchase your goods. If you're a capitalist, you have a certain imperative, you have a certain incentive. I need to maximize my profit. How do you maximize your profit? I maximize my profit by depressing labor. How can I get this product for cheaper? How can I get these people to work for cheaper? Because that allows you to maximize your profit. Even your argument talking about inequality is getting greater. I'm glad you at the very least acknowledged that. Why is that inequality getting greater? It's getting greater because these guys have figured out more and more ways to get their goods for cheaper and cheaper. Part of them getting their goods for cheaper is the depression of the wages of labor. You make a massive amounts of profit while at the same time depressing labor. Hey, how do you get labor for cheaper? What about slavery? Yeah, slavery allows you free labor. People just like that. That stopped. There was a war. It stopped in the United States. Britain stopped it earlier. So now we have to deal with labor. Fuck, we have to deal with labor. All right? At the very least, we have new consumers. Those people, they have to work at our plantations anyway. And we can find ways through the legal apparatus. We can find ways just pushing their wages down at the point where they have no other options, like expanding into other markets and putting our products into other territories. We can decrease the cost of labor. He completely oversteps this point. Completely ignores it. What about climate change? What about climate change? Like, how do you... This is kind of what I mean. This thing... There's no really problem to capitalism, really. There's no problem to it. There's no issue. There's no issue. I love this. I love the way he makes that brand, that wide-reaching statement. There's no problem to it. What about this been a problem to it? How about this? And items like this. I just use this as emblematic. Exxon knew about climate change almost 40 years ago. A new investigation shows the oil company understood the signs before it became public issue and spent millions to promote misinformation. Here's a question, Sargon. If capitalism is fucking awesome, you have two issues here. The first issue is these guys are pumping shit into the air that's adversely affecting me. Now, I wouldn't care about this if it wasn't affecting me. If I'm living on this planet, and this is the only planet that I know, and there's a company, a legal fiction, that has accrued and organized itself in a way that's doing things, that's pulling shit out the ground and pumping shit into the sky and into my lungs. I didn't agree to this. This is not me smoking a joint. This is me inhaling the air that ExxonMobil is pumping out to make more and more profits. Yes, it produces energy, but it's also producing shit that's adversely affecting me and adversely affecting the global stability of this planet from the standpoint of the environment. Now, you have people all across the world who are living in desperate poverty. Understand, they're dollar wealthier, but they're living in desperate poverty. And guess what? They're in line to be hit by the problems associated with this sooner than I am. They're taking a hit for something they never did, nowhere even near, may not even know exists, but they're going to take the hit for it from the standpoint of climate change. Now, you're telling me that ExxonMobil is doing this for shits and giggles. Two things. Why is ExxonMobil producing energy in this way? And why did ExxonMobil hide the fact that this was going to be cataclysmic for the rest of the public? Capitalism is no issue. Capitalism is no problems. Is this one of the lagging problems with capitalism, Sargon? Be honest. Is it? The reason why I say that, you have two problems. The first thing is they make energy in order to make profits. The second part to this is they don't want people to know that this energy that they make for profits is causing a problem, so they find ways to tamp down on the public information. They don't want their profits to be hit. That's what I'm getting at. The capitalistic inputs of maximizing my profits is at work. You saying that there's no problem in capitalism. Hey, that's a problem. This is a problem. This is a problem. That's the problem of capitalism. In a different system where your society looked at sustainability as an issue. And sustainability is an issue because you have a planet that if you do anything to that planet, it's going to adversely affect the people on that planet. Guess what? This is doing something to the planet. That's adversely affecting the planet. Now, unless you're taking a position that climate change doesn't exist and that all of these scientists are wrong, I would have to ask you, what are you using to take that basis that all of these scientists are wrong? What? You had a letter that was just issued by 20,000 scientists saying that the world needs to change the way it organizes its affairs. What about animal agriculture? Half of what takes place from the standpoint of climate change, global cataclysmic climate change, is from animal agriculture. Is that not also an aspect of climate change? Of capitalism. These guys are finding ways to maximize their profit. No, they won't do anything about the fact that their particular industry causes an issue, but it's an industry. It is a profit, money-making industry. Yes, it provides a product, but the goal of the whole thing is to maximize their profits, just like any other industry is to maximize their profits. What about the garbage media that's produced? Meaning the goal of it is not to inform people in the things they need to know. The goal is to maximize their profit by getting across certain narratives. I'm getting across to you that this idea of maximizing your profit, the system to which you find yourself, has problems. If you want to say that people are motivated and incentivized to do certain things in order to maximize profit, and this has been making the world wealthier by minute, small changes, okay. That's arguable. There will be some people who debate that, but okay. But saying that there are no consequences is laughable. It's laughable. As a guy who calls himself an atheist and believes in science, that's laughable. Even if you're a capitalistic hero, you would, at the very least, if you're being honest, have to admit that there are consequences to the arrangement. You can have any arrangement of the world that you want, providing you're willing to live with the consequences. Now, if your argument is, we've made minute changes in the capitalistic space that have allowed people to get $1 or $2 more, and $1 is mighty powerful, okay. If your argument is that, and there are no consequences, you're trying to have your cake and eat it too. What you're talking about is something else. I don't know what you're talking about. You're living in a fantasy land. This is utopia to you. Capitalism is not utopia. There is no such thing as utopia. Jason may be having a hard time making his case. But you're wrong. Empirically wrong. As somebody who claims to believe in science is wrong. Flat out. Wrong. You're absolutely wrong. Let's let him keep going. I heard him when he made that point, and I said to him, I was like, this is insanity and ridiculousness that he's making this case. In the way that he's making this case, saying capitalism is no downside. You're wrong. Let's let him keep going. There's more. I don't want to cut him off in the ridiculousness at this point that he's gone into.
It helps prevent famines. It's honestly like, and Marx was just flat wrong on the idea that there would be more poor and they would be poorer. The answer is actually that there's less poor and they are richer.
No Marxist claims that capitalism doesn't generate any wealth. That's
No, I didn't say that. But Marx's prediction was that there would be an increased number of poor people and they would get poorer, and that was just flat wrong.
Within a certain context. This also doesn't take into account things like infrastructure, etc. If you're talking about, a rising tide lifts all boats, but it's only going to lift so many, like, the inequality continues to be the issue. There's a reason why 95% of the world's clean water is used by 12% of the population. And this is still an ongoing problem.
I'm not saying there aren't
these
still problems.
These increases don't really...
You just said there were no problems. You just said there were no problems. I'm not saying there were no problems. What are you talking about? You just said capitalism has no issues. Inequality. Otherwise, there's no issues. Let's keep going. Yeah, whatever. You just said that. Yes, it was in a British accent, so it sounded great. But you just said that capitalism has no issues. Let's keep going. He's pointing one of the issues to you. There's instability in our climate and in our ecosystem. That's an issue. There's one.
Mean anything in the long run because the problem still remains.
I think they mean everything in the long run, and I think they mean like more than I from the first world would be able to truly understand from someone from the third world. From that perspective, where your whole life and your family's entire existence has been mired in absolute poverty, and then suddenly you can afford to get a mobile phone, or you can afford to buy clean water, you can afford to have something that none of the people in this country have ever had before, unless they were fabulously rich, say, then I think that matters. I think that...
The problem is, Sargon, that you have to also take into account the stuff that also matters. Meaning, yes, there's some people who have access to a cell phone now, but what about the people who were killed? Like, you completely overlook. Let's take a look at British history for the moment. Why did Britain go into America? Why did America rebel? Why did America have slaves? Do you believe that those slaves who were grabbed and taken took issue with the fact that they were grabbed and taken and made to work for no wages? Do you think they were bothered by that? Now, I understand that there were some people in the colony and they may have done great. There were some people who could buy tobacco. There are some people who advantaged themselves magnificently well off the back of the capitalistic thing and that they were having slaves to grow up the colony and all. What about the slaves themselves? What about Cuba? What about Cuba? What about South America? The reason I'm bringing up Cuba and South America, you may not know this, you're British, but from the standpoint of American history, we went into those places. They were calling them banana republics in some respects because we were getting our hands on those resources. Now, yeah, there was a political part of this, but the political part was being spurred on by a capitalistic instinct of we like those resources. We can get those resources for cheap. We're putting strong men into those countries. What about BP? You're British, British Petroleum. What about BP? So Britain has associations in Iran. Iran, secular, well, I don't know if it's secular. I don't remember if they're secular, but at the very least, they have a government that's run by the people of Iran. One of the guys who's running and takes power wants to use the oil money, the oil revenue from the oil of Iran for the people of Iran. And British Petroleum, a corporation, freaked out. And working in coordination with the United States and the CIA, creates a coup in Iran. Explain to me, do you believe that the people in Iran would have preferred Iran before or after the coup, when the United States worked with Britain in order to put a strong man in that country? I understand that some people are getting cell phones, but pretending as if there are no consequences to capitalism around the world is insanity. It's insanity. I don't understand how you can make this argument that there are very few to little consequences. Oh, I got me a new cell phone. I'm sorry that the people of that particular country had a strong man put in. A brutal, despotic strong man. BP wanted to keep their profits. BP did whatever they needed to do to keep their profits. When we were going into other republics in South America, and those places wanted to maintain some level of integrity, some level of rule, and they wanted the profits of their particular resources for the people of their countries. It didn't stop us from engaging in militaristic concerns in order to get access to those profits for cheap. Yes, I understand. Some people in some places were big as cell phones. Other people took a hit. They lost their lives. They were brutalized. And they lost their ability to even control themselves in a democratic process. I understand. You can weigh one. You can say, this may be true. The fact is, the other is also true. The darker brother of sorts of capitalism. Let's keep going.
Really, really matters.
Yeah, in this isolated example, that would be true. But we're
It's
not dealing with an
example.
isolated example.
That's a massive.
No, you're saying, okay, somebody would have access to more if they have more money. Well, yeah, of course they would. But it's not that simple.
Well, I didn't. What do you mean? Like, I'm saying that they do have these things. It's not theoretical. This is factually demonstrable with data. And
so that inequality in water access, like, are you saying that it doesn't exist, or?
No, I'm saying that it's reducing. This is the problem.
No, it's kind of true.
The problem is wording to some degree. Reducing, yes. What does that mean? Like, even if you're right, even if you say reducing, do you realize in, what was it? I think it's Ohio. I could be wrong on the state. The water issue, Flint, Michigan, I'm sorry to say Michigan. The governor of Michigan makes the determination that he wants to move to a Republican governor. Not for any reasons dealing with the place itself, but because he wants to cut costs. He wants to find a cheaper water source. And moving that cheaper water source ends up contaminating the water source with lead. This was a cost-benefit analysis based on a capitalistic system of how can we get this stuff for cheaper. This is a state. The state is not a corporation. It's not to be run as a corporation. The goal of it is, yes, to get things that are necessarily for a cost-benefit way. But the goal of it, in this case, the human being, was considered to be less important than a deal that that particular governor could get on water. And those people suffered lead poisoning. That's also capitalism, Sargon. All of these things are capitalism. All of these things have to be taken into account. When we're talking about a system where people's needs, meaning their capacity to work, their ability to use their physical labor in order to get the things that they need, that's not freedom. The fact that you have all of this homeless in California, and yet you have people with massive amounts of wealth, is a problem. That's a problem. Even if you want to say that it's making things a little bit better. I guess I'm asking, is that the argument? That they're making things a little bit better? I guess my main point is, there is no way to talk about the capitalistic instinct, maximize your profits, without also dealing with the negative repercussions of that particular instinct and how that shows itself in various facets of the world. Whether you want to talk about militaristic intervention, whether you want to talk about expansionism of Britain and America, whether you want to talk about the governor in Michigan. All of those things are element of the capitalistic system, or even for that matter, slavery. All of that has to be put on the table if we're having this discussion, to have a contextual discussion. You saying that it's made people a little wealthier. What do you mean by wealthier? All of that stuff needs to be explained in detail, because that needs to be weighed against the actual consequences of capitalism, of that instinct. All systems. Here's the thing. All systems will have some kind of downside to the systems. Doesn't matter what the system is. He's being a little rah-rah. That's what I'm saying. It's a bit rah-rah for capitalism, and it's rah-rah for capitalism in a way that ignores the downside. I understand why he's doing that. He's attacking somebody who's a Marxist. And so attacking a person who's a Marxist, he's trying to say, look, capitalism does have positive benefits. You can't go too far over on the positive benefits, though. That's all I'm getting at. I understand you want to hit him, and you want to hit him in the standpoint of, look, Marx was wrong, and that wasn't just wrong. There's some of these people who are getting a little bit richer, wealthier. They have $1 extra. $1 is a powerful thing. What do you have to say about that, Marxist? So I get it. I understand where he's coming from. Let's let him keep going. I'm not going to let this go for too much longer, because I wanted to talk more so about that very specific line of capitalism doesn't really have any repercussions. And I'm going to let him follow the trail for a little bit, but this video has already gone into 51 minutes, and I don't want to go over an hour. So let's let him wrap up.
No. Listen, what I'm saying is it's in progress. Capitalism is currently in the process of making the entire world clean, healthy, and making human beings wealthy and happy and rich.
All right, I'm in his commentary on that, because ultimately that's his point. And I think that's laughable. In 1980s, the countries for the most part was growing together, meaning the United States, the rich, the poor, wealthy, etc. The classes were, and you could see a wealth trend that was going up in America. I'm using America. In 1980s, that stopped. You had Ronald Reagan. And when Ronald Reagan got in office, Ronald Reagan cut taxes. He essentially attacked unions, attacked workers. And since the 1980s, the real wages of workers in America hasn't grown. If Sargon is right, that would have never happened. This would have been just a trend of people just growing and growing and growing into utopia, and everybody bearing their chests in the sun, and they're running in the days. Oh, yes, capitalism. Capitalism has saved the world. That didn't happen. That's empirically false. What you're saying is empirically false. If what you're saying is right, that wealth trend would have just continued to tick on up. Productivity has been going through the roof. Real wages, not so much. It completely ignores the fact that at a certain point, the people who are wealthy and the people with means are going to inject themselves into the political system and make the system itself work for them. That's what it completely forgets. That completely ignores. They act as if the capitalistic system is not necessarily entranced in the political system. Newsflash, it is. It is. Meaning, the moment that somebody gets all of this money accrued, that person starts using that money to put into the political apparatus itself. And the very fact that it has money to put into the political apparatus changes and contorts and tweaks and makes the political apparatus malleable to their wants. We're going to cut taxes. We're going to pass bills against unions. We're going to attack workers. These are things that they put into effect because it allows them to maximize their profits. The decisions that are being made, just like ExxonMobil saying, we're not going to tell the world about climate change. That means that you are empirically wrong. Now, I understand. In one case, I would say that you're right. But you're right in a way that it doesn't have any distinction to it. It's making the world cleaner. Is it? Is it? Why do you think it's making the world cleaner? I just showed you the thing where ExxonMobil has just said that climate change. In fact, you're wrong. You're empirically wrong. If you were right, scientists wouldn't be screaming at the top of their lungs about climate change. Do you believe that carbon, Sargon atheist, do you believe that carbon is a real pollutant? Do you believe it's just, dandelions? It's just air freshener. What do you believe carbon is when it's in excess and it's blocking the thing? That's pollution. The fact that ExxonMobil lied about pollution means that you are empirically wrong. It is not making the world a cleaner place if they're lying about pollution and if scientists are screaming at the top of their lungs about climate change. What about animal agriculture? I guess I'm making a point to you that this idea that it's making the world cleaner is false. It's laughably false. We wouldn't have a climate change issue if it was true. Now, if you're saying that climate change is not real, if you're saying that all of these scientists are lying, then I need to understand what you're using to make that determination. This is physical matter reality. Scientists are the people who deal with physical matter reality. Are they lying? Are they wrong? Is their research wrong? Is the research by 90-something% scientists that push in this direction wrong? Explain to me. And if they're right, then that means that what you just said, that is making the world cleaner, is wrong. It's wrong. Could it make the world cleaner? It could. Will it? Only if it makes $1. Only if it makes $1. Meaning all of this is purely dependent upon whether or not people can make profit off of those things. And I'm making a point to you that many of the things that need to take place from a standpoint of human concern and human need are not necessarily profitable. Homelessness is not profitable. Now, it could be profitable if somebody paid somebody for it, but in and of itself, it requires somebody to pay somebody to do something about it. Nobody's going to do that. Climate change could be profitable. You can have a green energy revolution, but again, that depends on somebody being willing to pay to start up the processes to do it. You're in an economic system that doesn't necessarily take into the social harm, the social calamity into its calculation on what he wants to do from the standpoint of a company. The company just wants to make cash. When McDonald's makes a hamburger, do you honestly believe that McDonald's cares about giving you a nutritious hamburger? Or McDonald's is just trying to give you something that you will give them money for? The human concern is less important than McDonald's making $1. That's what I'm getting at. In one case after the next, this idea that capitalism is making the world a cleaner place is laughable. It's laughable. Even if everything you said right there to Jason Unruhe is true, you fail. Your argument fails, entirely fails on that one very specific point. You don't acknowledge the consequences of this particular system. And because you don't acknowledge the consequences of this particular system, I look at your argument with skepticism. Like, it makes me look at everything else that you said in this piece with skepticism, because on that point, you're wrong. You're outright wrong. If you want to argue your case against a Maoist, fair enough. But at the very least, you have to acknowledge the negative impacts of the system that you're arguing for. Environmental collapse is one. Environmental calamity, let's call it calamity and collapse. That's one. This thing with the economic stuff, I don't know if he's right on that part, but like I said, it makes me hold it with skepticism because that part is so dramatically wrong. So dramatically wrong. It's not making the world a cleaner place. The societal impact is not taken into account when these guys come up with policies or come up with the things that they want to do. They just want to make cash. They just want to make cash. I will leave it at that. Let's see who's here. I didn't want to do this piece putting in just a bunch of, here's a bunch of, the problem is this interview is 2 hours long. It's so long. And I can't necessarily cover the entirety of the interview. That point I wanted to cover because that point I thought was important. I thought that point was, you are dramatically wrong on this very specific point. And the idea that you can't take what this guy is saying and just say, you're right. There are some consequences to this, but I'm arguing against the Maoists, so I'm going to attack the Maoists in this particular way. But I acknowledge the consequence. You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. So, Wesley Walker, Jamal, I'm still catching up on your weekend videos. Fuck YouTube and their unsuitable asses. If they won't pay you, we will. Wesley Walker, thank you very much. You are way too kind. You are way far too kind. But thank you, Wesley. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. There's some videos that I do that I accept I'm not gonna get paid for. Like YouTube has come up with this thing that if you talk about Syria in any way, you get demonetized. That's fucking insane. They are literally at the brink of war. And they're saying that having conversations about this, for whatever reason, our advertisers don't like this. And hey, by the way, talking about Sargon and capitalism, right there. These guys, Syria and the United States, are talking about a war. It's very possible that some of the motivations for that war, yes, maybe ideological. That's true. But at some point, there is an incentive structure built into getting their hands on some of these assets. Now, YouTube looks at this and says, we don't like you talking about this. It hurts our advertisers. YouTube is making a choice based on profits. Now, it has to make a choice based on profits because it's a corporation. But I'm making a point that what's being said, this idea of, yes, YouTube is a company and they can make those choices, but they're demonetizing. Like, they're literally making a choice based on their own profits on something to shut up people about war. And yes, they still allow people to talk, but they try to give a disincentive of people spending time talking about this particular thing because people won't be paid for that particular thing. That's also capitalism. This is going to hurt our profits. Yes, what he's saying, he's talking about war. That's important, but it's going to hurt our profits. So we need to disincentivize him from talking about these things by demonetizing his videos. I guess I'm just making a point. I understand you're arguing against malice. I understand you want to strut the best aspects of capitalism that you consider to be best aspects. But come on. You have to be honest about the negatives. You have to be honest about the negatives. This idea of maximizing profit is a problem because that right there, that incentive, that goes into some of everything that people do. And it makes people lean in particular ways that are not necessarily advantageous from societal impact. ExxonMobil saying, we're going to blow this climate change stuff off because we don't want the public to know is the capitalistic instinct at its best. The capitalistic instinct at its best. So, I'm not going to keep this one any longer because this one has gone ridiculously long, like nobody's business. Interesting debate. Unruhe is an interesting guy. I have to be honest, I don't know much about Sargon. This is the first time I've come across, actually looking at his videos, I've come across the name. I don't know his ideology. Like, I don't know his point of view. I don't know if he's an unapologetic capitalist. I don't know what he is. And I understand arguing with the Marxists and trying to go at the guy and everything else. But if you're going to have an honest argument, at the very least, you have to acknowledge the negative implications of capitalism. Like I said, slavery, environmental collapse, this idea of pushing down workers. Even if you say that there is a modicum of making the world richer and wealthier, you don't know that. If that was true, we would have a different trend line in the United States by itself. Real wages. Real wages. We'd have a different trend line. That is not the case. That is not the case. So, I will end it here. I don't know if you're going to see me again tonight. I've done videos all day. So I try to do at least 4 videos a day. That's a hellish schedule, but at least I try it. Don't always hit that, but I try it. So maybe you see me again. Probably not. If anything happens in Syria, you would definitely see me again. I am keeping track of that particular story. And I will see you guys probably tomorrow. So if you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the patron. Thanks, everyone. And Wesley Walker, thank you. My wife is making you a t-shirt. She's in Disney World now. When she gets back, she'd finish it. So thank you very much. And what I mean by t-shirt, I said each month, my patron thing, I pick a person to give a t-shirt to. I think it's $20 donation a month, something like that, that makes them eligible. But by far, I can't give it to anyone but Wesley for last month. This month is going to have a different winner. So thank you very much, Wes. And I will see you guys probably tomorrow. Hopefully, just tomorrow. Thanks, guys.